Okay, so we know that total expenditure will increase if consumption increases. And that will then result in aggregate demand increasing, CPI increasing, and real GDP increasing. We also know that the reverse will happen. If consumption goes down in the economy, then total expenditure will go down and aggregate demand will go down, which will then result in CPI and real GDP going down. But what causes consumption to increase or decrease? Well, let's remember what consumption is. Consumption is all of the spending by households on products for final use. So when we say consumption, we're talking about individuals and their households. You, not your business, but you personally, when you buy a Snickers bar and you eat that Snickers bar just because you want to eat a candy bar, because you're hungry, or for whatever other reason, when you consume a Snickers bar and you bought it with your own money for your own satisfaction, because Snickers really satisfies, that means that Snickers provides utility, then you are contributing to consumption. So that's what we're talking about here. When you pay your electric bill, consumption. When you put gas in your car, consumption. When you pay your phone bill for your phone for personal use, that's all consumption. When you go on vacation for you, that's consumption. All right? So the question is, what causes consumption to go up or down? Well, then we could basically answer the question, what causes you to have, to be able to buy more Snickers bars, go on more vacations, put more gas in your car? What causes you to be able to buy more stuff for you? Well, we're going to talk about three things. I'm sure there are plenty of them, but the three main things, the three main ideas that we're going to talk about in this Principles of Macroeconomics class that affect consumption are income, meaning in general, income among all consumers in the economy. Secondly is interest rates. And thirdly is taxes. And here's the basic idea here. Remember that wages are not income. Wages is a word for producers. That is a short-run aggregate supply idea. Wages is the price of labor. So we're not talking about wages here. We're talking about income. Income is from the point of view of the household. Okay? So income means how much money that you get in a month or a week or a year to be able to spend on yourself or on your family. So, obviously, if you have more income, you can buy more stuff. But if you have less income, you can buy less stuff. So, very simply, an increase in income leads to an increase in consumption. Because consumers have more money in the bank. They have more money to be able to buy more stuff. And therefore, an increase in income leads to an increase in consumption. However, a decrease in income is going to lead to a decrease in consumption in the economy. So when income among all people out there in the economy, now if your income goes up, but everybody else's income goes down, then that means that income went down in the economy. It's not based on one person or even a small number of people. When income goes up, that means across the board, on average, all people have made more money. On average. So, more money means more consumption. Less money in the bank means less consumption. Interest rates, on the other hand, I want to remind you what interest rates are. Interest rates are the price of money, or the price of borrowing. And the basic idea goes like this, is that when interest rates are higher, when interest rates go up, I'm going to put IR for interest rates. When interest rates go up, that means that consumers can borrow less. It's more expensive to borrow money. So when interest rates are higher, when you go to the bank to borrow money to buy a car or to maybe take out a loan to buy a bunch of Christmas presents. Okay, when interest rates are higher, people are going to borrow less money. Borrowing less money means spending less money. When people borrow less, they spend less. Spending less means lower consumption. And so higher interest rates ultimately mean a decrease in consumption. On the other hand, if interest rates are lower, when interest rates are lower, that means if you go to the bank, they're going to charge you less money to borrow from them. So you have to pay them less money to buy stuff. Well, if you have to pay the bank less money to borrow money, you're more likely to borrow more money. And if you borrow more, you'll spend more. Okay, so lower interest rates means borrowing. People are going to borrow more money. And if they borrow more money, they're going to spend more money. And when they spend more, that means an increase in consumption. And so we can now sort of take a shortcut and just simply say that an increase in interest rates lead to a decrease in consumption, and a decrease in interest rates lead to an increase in consumption. I'm going to go ahead and put these things over here. We'll start with income. So an increase in income leads to an increase in consumption. So we're going to put 3 arrows here. One of them is representing income, one's representing interest rates, and one's representing taxes. So an increase in income will lead to an increase in consumption. A decrease in interest rates will lead to an increase in consumption. Lower interest rates, higher consumption because people are going to borrow more and spend more. On the other hand, down here on a decrease in consumption, we'll do 3 arrows. First one is a decrease in income. When people have less money, when they're taking home less money from their job, they're going to spend less money. So consumption will decrease, total expenditure will decrease, aggregate demand will decrease, CPI and real GDP will also decrease. Another thing that will lead to a decrease in consumption is an increase in interest rates. When it costs more money to borrow money, then people are going to borrow less, spend less, and that's a decrease in consumption, decrease in total expenditure. Last thing is taxes. Taxes represent how much money you have left over after you get paid. So, if you have to pay more in taxes, you're going to keep less of your money. And if you keep less of your money, you don't have as much money to spend. And therefore, an increase in taxes is going to lead to a decrease in consumption because you don't have as much money to spend. So, consumption will decrease when there's an increase in taxes. On the other hand, if the government lowers taxes, they let you keep more of your money. So a decrease in taxes is going to lead to an increase in consumption because you kept more of your money. And what are you going to do with that extra money that you kept? Well, you're going to spend more of it. And so consumption is going to go up when taxes go down. Decrease in taxes is going to lead to an increase in consumption. Okay? And so this represents how, the 3 main things that affect consumption are income, interest rates, and taxes. Now let's look at what affects investment in the economy. Okay, so let's review what investment is. Investment is all of the spending by businesses on final use products. Okay, so if a business is making cars and they buy tires to put on the cars that they're selling, that's not a final use product. Okay, that is an intermediate good. They're buying the tires, then they're taking the tires, putting them on the cars that they're building, and then selling the car. When they sell the car, they're selling the tires with the car. The business has not used the tires at all. Those tires still have 0 miles on them when they sell the car. Okay, that's an intermediate good. What we're talking about here is investment is final use products. When that car manufacturer, for example, buys a computer for one of their employees to use for designing cars, that employee is going to use up the computer. They're not then selling the computer to a customer. They're using the computer. And when the business uses the computer, they are the final user of that product. Therefore, that computer would be included in investment. So when businesses buy things that they use up, where they are the final user of the product, that is put into the category of investment. And since investment is one of the categories in total expenditure, we know that an increase in investment will lead to an increase in total expenditure, which then leads to an increase in aggregate demand. A decrease in investment will lead to a decrease in total expenditure, which would then lead to a decrease in aggregate demand. And so now we want to answer the question, what is going to cause investment to increase or decrease in an economy? Well, we're going to focus on only two things. And the first thing we're going to focus on is expected return on investment. Now, we have already talked about this idea of expected return on investment, so I'll briefly review it, but I'm not going to go into great detail. Expected, and I'm going to put ROI because we've already learned about return on investment. Remember that expected return on investment is basically whether or the degree to which the business thinks they're going to make a lot of money or a little money on the stuff they buy. So if a company thinks they'll make a lot of money if they buy a new computer, if buying that new computer is then going to lead them to making a lot more money, then do you think they're more likely to buy the computer or less likely to buy the computer? Of course, they're going to be more likely to buy it because they think they're going to make a lot more money from buying that computer, from using that computer. That computer is going to lead them to getting lots more profit. But if buying a new machine, if they don't expect that buying that new machine is going to result in them making a lot of profit, then they're going to say, no, we don't want to buy the machine. We don't really think we're going to make very much money off of that new machine, so let's not buy it. Okay? And we'll get to that in a second. And then the second thing is just like consumption, interest rates. And the reason interest rates are important for businesses is because businesses often borrow money to buy the things that they consume. They often, if they're going to buy a truck, instead of buying the truck for cash that they're going to use for deliveries, they may borrow money from a bank to buy the truck and then make payments on the loan for the truck. Okay, and so interest rates are actually going to affect investment in the very same way that they affect consumption. Okay, so let's go to expected return on investment. If the expected return on investment is high, so I'm going to put up arrow with ROI. That means a high return on investment. If businesses believe, in general, out there in the economy, that investment in capital is going to lead to a high return on investment, if across the board businesses are thinking that they're going to make a lot of money back when they buy consumables, when they buy stuff that they use up, then they're going to go ahead and do it. And deciding to go ahead and purchase things means increasing investment. In a simpler way of saying it, if they think they're going to make a lot of money on a purchase, then they're more likely to make the purchase. On the other hand, if they think that they're not going to make very much money on an investment, if their return on investment is low, or they think it's going to be low, then they're less likely to make the purchase. And so investment will go down. And so investment is likely to be higher if businesses think that their return on investment in the economy is high. Up arrow. But if businesses think that their return on investment is low, they're not going to make very much money on an investment, then they are less likely, down arrow, less likely to make the investment. Investments will be lower, total expenditure will be lower, and aggregate demand will be lower. Now talking about interest rates, there's two possibilities. Interest rates can go up or interest rates can go down. And just like with consumption, higher interest rates lead to companies borrowing less. Why are they going to borrow less money? Well, because it's more expensive to borrow money. If interest rates are higher, that means the price of money is higher. And remember, when buying something, if the price is higher, demanders are going to demand less of it. And so businesses are demanding less borrowed money because the price of money is higher. Interest rates are higher, they're borrowing less. If they're borrowing less, that means that they're going to spend less. They have less money to spend. And that means a decrease in investment. But if interest rates are low, then they're likely to borrow more. And the reason they're going to borrow more is because it's cheaper to borrow money. When interest rates are low, it's cheaper to borrow money. The price of money is lower. The percentage that's charged on the borrowed money is a lower number. So businesses can spend less money on their interest and more money on the stuff they're buying. So if they borrow more, then that means that they're going to spend more money. Borrowing more and spending more means an increase in investment. They're spending more money on final use products because they can borrow it at a lower interest rate. Okay? And so investment will be higher if interest rates are lower. On the other hand, investment will be lower if interest rates in the economy are higher. And we're going to come back to this subject of interest rates a lot later in the semester. So it's very important that you understand that a low interest rate means a low price to borrow money. Low price to borrow money means borrowing more and spending more, which means an increase in total expenditures. Okay? All right, so what you're looking at here is the determinants of aggregate demand coming from total expenditure through the category of investment. Okay? Now we're going to look at what are the determinants of government spending. All right, this is an easy one because we don't really have much to talk about. What causes government spending to increase or decrease? I have one answer for you. Government policy. And all I can tell you is that government spending is simply decided by Congress, at least in the United States. When the government decides to spend more money based on policy, government spending will go up. When the government decides to spend less money based on government policy, government spending will go down. When government spending goes up, total expenditure goes up. When government spending goes down, total expenditure goes down. And that's all I have to say about government spending. Now our last category is net exports. All right, our last category for determining what affects total expenditure is net exports. We know that if net exports increase in the economy, then total expenditure will increase and aggregate demand will increase. But if net exports decreases, then total expenditure will decrease and aggregate demand will decrease. Now, assuming this is, remember, this is ceteris paribus. This is, we're not considering the effects of other variables. We're holding all other variables stable while we only change net exports. So the question is, what causes net exports to increase or decrease? And I'm going to give you two categories. The first one is foreign real GDP. What that basically means is output in other countries. How well are other countries performing? Are they in an economic expansion or are they in an economic contraction? Okay? And so basically it's dependent upon real GDP in other countries. And so here's what we're going to say. When other countries are in an economic expansion, and so we're going to say expansion in foreign countries. So other countries are experiencing expansions. That's going to lead to an increase in net exports. And I'll tell you why. When other countries are doing well, they have more money. They have more stuff. And so they are more readily willing to import things from us, to buy our stuff. They're doing better financially because they're in an expansion, and so then they have the money to buy our stuff. And therefore, an increase in net exports will result if other countries have an increase in real GDP. So, foreign expansion, which remember means that real GDP is increasing in other countries. On the other hand, if other countries are experiencing economic contraction, they don't have as many resources. They can't afford to buy our stuff, and therefore we are going to sell less stuff to them. So there will be a decrease in net exports if other countries are experiencing economic contraction. And so if foreign economies are experiencing economic contraction, then we will sell fewer exports to those countries and total expenditure will go down. Last category is, the second one under net exports is exchange rates. Now when I say exchange rates, what I'm talking about is, I'm talking about how valuable is the currency in other countries versus the currency in our country. And so what I'm going to say here is this, is I'm going to put an up or a down arrow representing money value in for our country. Okay? So the two possibilities are our money, our dollars, so an increase in the dollar, in the value of the dollar. Okay? So the US dollar either increases in value or the US dollar is decreasing in value. And so the question now is, how is that going to affect whether people in other countries buy our stuff or don't buy our stuff? All right, so we haven't discussed exchange rates yet, and this is a principles class, so let me just give you a quick sort of explanation of what exchange rates are. We talked about money several lessons ago, and the thing is that every economy has its own kind of money. Now, some groups of economies have money. For example, in Europe, they have a common currency across several countries called the euro. But in Great Britain, they have their own currency. In the United States, we have the dollars. Over in Japan, they have yens. Different countries, different economies throughout the world have different kinds of currency, different names for their money. And because money has different, or the different kinds of monies have different supplies and different demands, the value of the different monies, they don't run together. So the US dollar may, let's say, let's say for the sake of argument, that it costs $3 to buy 2 euros. Let's see if I can get the euro symbol right, okay? I don't know, I can't remember if I got that right or not. But let's say that it costs $3 to buy 2 euros, okay? And therefore, if I go on a vacation, let's say to France, I have to spend euros in France. But I only have US dollars. So what I have to do is I have to exchange my dollars for euros. And in this case, the exchange rate or ratio is $3 to 2 euros. So for every 2 euros that I want to buy, I have to pay out $3. Now, it could be, let's say, 5 or 6 months later, that the exchange rate could change, and it could go to where it now costs me $2.75 to buy 2 euros. And so now it costs me less money to buy the same amount of euros. And what that means is that the value of the euro has gone down, but when the value of the euro goes down, that means that the value of the dollar has gone up. That is an exchange rate. So here what's happened is, in this particular example, the dollar has become stronger and the euro has become weaker because I can now buy more euros for less money. Okay? And so that's the idea of the exchange rate and the relative value of the dollar to other currencies. So here's the basic idea. When the value of the dollar goes up, when it's stronger, I can buy more currency from other countries. But those countries can't buy as much currency. See, when it was $3 to buy 2 euros, then for 2 euros, someone in France could buy $3 and then buy $3 worth of American products. But if it's now $2.75 to buy 2 euros, now, even though I'm getting the same amount for less money, if someone's going the other direction, if someone in France is buying American money, they're getting less money for the same number of euros. So their money is buying less. So when the US dollar value is going up, the foreign currency value or foreign value is going down, and now they can buy less stuff. So when the US dollar has a stronger value, people in other countries can't buy as much American stuff. And so we're not going to export as much stuff because they're not buying as much stuff from us. So a decrease in foreign value currency is going to lead to a decrease in net exports. When our money is stronger, we will export less stuff. But when the US dollar is weaker in value compared to foreign currencies, that is an increase in foreign value of their currency, and that's going to lead to an increase in net exports because they can afford to buy more of our stuff because they can afford to buy more of our dollars. And so what I really want you to know here is this, very simply, is when the exchange rate is such that the US dollar is stronger, the US dollar is more valuable, then that leads to a decrease in net exports, which then leads to a decrease in total expenditure and a decrease in aggregate demand. So our aggregate demand will actually go down when the value of our currency becomes stronger. And so an increase in the value of the dollar is going to lead to a decrease in net exports and a decrease in total expenditure. On the other hand, when the US dollar becomes less valuable compared to currencies in other countries, that means that people in other countries can afford to buy more American stuff, and so they will buy more American stuff. We will export more stuff to them, and we will have an increase in net exports and an increase in total expenditure. And so a decrease in the value of the US dollar will lead to an increase in net exports, an increase in total expenditure, and an increase in aggregate demand, and ultimately an increase in inflation, consumer price index, and an increase in output because they're buying more of our stuff, so we're going to have to produce more. All right, well, that's it for this lesson on the determinants of short-run aggregate supply and the determinants of aggregate demand. This is very important. Understanding these things will now bring you to a place where we can open up the doors to understanding so much more in macroeconomics.